Well, good afternoon. So, like I said in the Acts video, because I was testing out some stuff, we aren't having in person youth group tonight. It's sad. I'm gonna miss everybody, but we want everyone to be safe and sound this tonight. Hopefully, you are safe and sound where you are right now. I made a mistake. I kind of forgot the book for this lesson, so we're going to kind of wing it a little bit. I'll probably go a little more over the devotional you guys are supposed to do, and maybe go over the book we are reading. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about beneath the fake news. Now we all know what fake, we all hear the words fake news, all that, especially nowadays. But could there be fake news about the Christmas story? Thomas Watson, A Body of Divinity, says Christ was born of a virgin that we might be born of God. He took our flesh that he might give us his spirit. He lay in the manger that we might lie in paradise. Now, I kind of want to go over what we learned last week. And if you watch the videos, what did you get from last week? And because it's just me and the camera, I have to write the answers down. But I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments on answers. Okay, so answer. We learned about certain parts of the Christmas story that might not be right. Like he was born in a cave or a stable or all of that. There was a donkey that they rode on. Everyone hears about, Mary rode on a donkey. We don't have scriptural evidence for that. Now, does that mean that was not true? I can't say that. It was an emergency birth that they were getting so close to Bethlehem, and all of a sudden, bam, Jesus is about to be born, and they have to rush. The scripture does not say that. It actually says that when they were in Bethlehem, the time for Jesus' birth has come. So it's kind of like, everybody has a due date, usually. Sometimes a baby might come before the due date. Sometimes it might come after. Sometimes it might come right on time. But it's usually for the most part, unless, of course, emergencies, it's usually when it's time for the baby to be born. There was no room in the inn. Now, of course, we all get told that story, he was laid in a manger because there was no room for him in an inn. We hear that a lot in a lot of translations, that word inn. But that is probably not true. Because when we think of inn, we think of commercial place, but there was really no commercial lodging in Bethlehem. It was too small of a town. Okay, so another question. What is the Greek word Luke uses for no room in the blank? Remember, we just said no room in the inn. So, what exactly is that he's talking about? So what's that Greek word? But also, what does the word really mean? So I'm giving you some chance to think about it. It's a very hard word to come up with, so I understand you're probably not going to be able to say it out loud or even try to spell it. I probably wouldn't be able to. But I just want you to think. Katalima, and it means guest room. And the reason why we believe that it means guest room is Luke writes a story later on in his gospel about what we call the Good Samaritan. And the Good Samaritan takes this guy who's been beat up, left for dead, and he takes him to an inn. And the word he uses for the word inn does apply a commercial like inn. But, as we said before, the word he uses for the story of Jesus' birth is more of like guest room. And people we might be like, what do you mean by guest room? Well, guest room would be like, so they have a house. There's a house, and sometimes in the back of the house, they'll have another room built, and that would be a guest room. That would be for people that are visiting. So you would have your family room. Most people would have in front of the family room, which would be connected and be still indoors, would be a place for your animals to live. But the animals had free reign over the house, and they would come upstairs into the family room. So with that, they would put a manger where Jesus laid, a feeding trough, in the family room and also in their room. So if they came upstairs, they could eat wherever they are, etc. So most likely, Mary possibly could have been born in the family room. So the family room was where you ate, you cooked, you spent your time together as a family, and you also slept there too. So it was like one room that was just designated for the family that lived in that house. So as I said before, I was talking, she could have given birth on the family table for all we know. We don't know, but the implication is there was no room in the guest house, so Jesus was born in the family room, and there is a good chance he could have been born in where the animals live, but probably not, just because of being a family. They would have gone to Joseph's family to go stay with them. Okay, so room, we're going to review, and because I don't have the book, we're going to focus a little bit on this before we do anything else. As I said, I haven't had a chance to do mine, really, so, it's just interesting. So, we're going to go over some of the questions, and I'm going to kind of answer my view of the questions. I hope that you can comment and tell me your view, or if you're in our youth group, we give you this little binder to do. Write the answers yourself and bring them back to me. And I'd like to see your answers for some of these stuff. So, of course, it starts off with it wants us to reflect what we learned last week. We kind of just did that a little bit. It gives us some reading of the scripture. And we're not going to do the first thing they ask us to do because they want us to read the scripture and write in key words. Why is it key? And the word's definition of the word that we're looking for. So we're going to skip that just because that would take us hours to just do. So next thing they want us to do is they want us to put this into practice, put what we learned into practice. So take some time this week to think about how the material you are covering with your group can make a difference in the way you live your life. In the New Testament book of James, the author implores us to be doers of the God's word and not hearers only. The real test is what is important to us, is how well it integrates into our lives. So one of the questions is, can you trust the accuracy of the gospel account? Thus, you can trust the accuracy of the Bible. What difference does that make in the way you live your life? As I told my teens before, it's okay to have doubts, it's okay to have questions. I know some people say, no, you have to believe it fully. And I'm like, no, the virgin birth is one of the hardest things scientifically to prove. I believe that it happened, but that's one of those things I have to just have faith in without full evidence. But you do need to have evidence when it comes to the Bible. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the spring when we do J. Warner Wallace. So another question, how does trusting the Bible affect your home life? How does it affect your work life? It should affect us. It should come to the point where we're like, does God really want me to act this way or do this thing? And question how we act and how we interact with people. Because we want to bring glory to Him. But again, if we can't believe in the Bible, then how are we going to be like we have to do that? How about your friendship? What does it mean in your personal life? Again, we want to show God's love and God's kindness. What is the biggest truth you learned this week? Write it down. Well, I always believed in the end. I always believed in Mary had to get rushed to Bethlehem and had to give birth. I always believed in the stables. And recently, after I stopped believing in the whole stable thing and thinking of that room, I thought, oh, she probably just gave birth in the room for the animals. Well, but now I'm starting to believe, well, there is a high chance she could have given birth while in the family room, which would have made a lot more sense when you talk about it, when you look at cultural stuff. Okay, what are two more concepts that emerged from your study this week? Again, those were the biggest ones. How has your time with the group changed the way you view the story of the first Christmas? That's a good one. We all have different views of the Christmas story. Christmas story, it's always this great thing, and I agree that sometimes you're going to have to, if you want to make movies, you might have to add some stuff, but it's changed to the point where it's hard to watch sometimes some videos and some stuff like, did it really happen like this? How did you think about it before? How do you think about it now? Again, I thought a lot of different stuff. I thought different stuff that I was taught, stuff that I was told as a kid. So then I have closing reflections and stuff like that. And closing reflections come from the book. So now we're going to try to do this Bible study without me having the book. So wish me luck. I might try and make a video later on when I'm at my house to I have the book to kind of go over it a little more and get a little more detailed about it. So look for that. I will share that on our Facebook page. But how many people have seen The Christmas Story? Now, again, I'm winging this. They have this whole thing for me to read. And when I go back home and I have a chance to review, make the video. I might make it tonight, actually, after I'm done spending some Christmas stuff with my mom. I might go back online and remake this video and do with the book. But if you remember this story about the Christmas story, he had a certain present he wanted to have. And he memorized that, and he told everybody, this is what I want. He even wrote a paper on it. And every time he tells people, the first thing they say was, you're going to poke your eye out. And stuff like that. So they want us to talk a little bit about, did you ever, and I think there's some questions. What gift did you long to have as a kid or now? So is there a gift you ever really wanted, either as a kid or now, that you're like, I wanted to have this. I needed to have this. The next question is, did you ever get that gift? So, did you ever get the gift you always wanted? Or you wanted at that point? It could have been the most popular toy when you were a kid. When I was a kid, Buzz Lightyear was big. Now, I really didn't care that much for it. Like, I liked it because the movie. But I never really watched that much TV growing up to the point where I saw the commercials, or I was never really in the school system that much when that was big. So I'm like, everyone's talking about it. I never really saw that much. But I had a Buzz Lightyear when I grew up. I also had a Woody and stuff. It was really good. The video, but there were some toys later on. Sports cards. I loved. All the kids in my class had all the cool kids had sports cards. So I had to have sports cards. It could be toy cars. It could be all these stuff that you had to have. Was it amazing as you thought it would be? So when you got that gift, so like Ralph from the Christmas Story, he got the present he wanted. He was so excited about it. And he was amazed by it, all of that, until he shot himself in the face. And he didn't technically shoot himself in the face. He shot a metal target, and the BB kind of bounced and hit him. And he actually kind of lied. He kind of made it sound like an icicle came in and hit him in the eye area. But yeah, what's the most bizarre Christmas present you've ever gotten? So it could be an ugly sweater from a family member. Ralph, if you watch the movie, he got this onesie pink bunny outfit, and he hated it, but his parents made him wear it for a little bit. And of course, was it from a family member? So was it that ugly sweater from like an aunt or a grandmother or a parent or a sibling? What do you do with that gift? Some people would be like, I just threw it away, or I put it in the closet and never touched it ever again. So then, have you ever received a heartwarming gift from a person? So, kind of like for adults, it could be money you weren't expecting from somebody. I know growing up, we were very poor, and sometimes we'd have these people anonymously send us money for us to have a better Christmas. And of course, we don't know the person because they did it anonymously, but that was a heartwarming gift. Um, it was really nice to know that people cared about us enough to try to help us so we could have, a great Christmas. We didn't care about presents growing up, but of course a lot of people do. And so they're like, you need to have good Christmas. You need to have great presents. You need to have that nice big meal and stuff. So people in our church and our community gave us a heartwarming gift. But did anyone in your life ever give you a heartwarming gift? And how did it happen? Like, did you go around and be like, I need this? This has been some trying times, and somebody gave you something. I've had people where I didn't mean to, but I vented. I'm like, man, I'm going through a hard time. I need something to fix my car. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call, be like, hey, people here have donated money to make sure that your car can get fixed. We don't care what the amount is. Tell us what the amount is. We'll give you the money to fix your car. I didn't mean to tell people, but that's how it happened. I've had people, without me even saying anything, pay for my school books or pay for my college tuition or stuff, all the time without me saying anything. But I want to hear comments and some of these questions, some of these answers to these questions. Did you ever have a gift that you really wanted as a kid or now? And what was it? And did you ever get it? Did anyone ever give you this weird gift? And what the heck did you do with it? And then also, did anyone ever give you a heartwarming gift? And how the heck did it happen? Did it just happen out of the ordinary? Did you tell somebody something and they felt they needed to help you? Okay, so we're gonna try this time. We're gonna play the video and we're gonna have you watching it. And hopefully this works. I'm gonna turn it up loud enough so that hopefully you guys can get a good view of this. Again, this is from Lee Strobel. It's his Case for Christmas. He does these little 20-something minute videos. We did one last week. This week we're going to talk about a certain topic, and then we're going to discuss it. And we're not going to be able to discuss it that well just because, again, I don't have the book with me. And I'll do that again a little bit later tonight when I have the book. But let's just get this done. Let's watch the video. Let's go over some questions or some points from it. And I hope you enjoy this. I'll get it set up.
As a journalist trained in law, I'm especially attuned to this phenomenon of fake news. That is, reports that seem persuasive at first, but which turned out to be based on half-truths or outright falsehoods once they're examined more carefully. And believe it or not, even Christmas has been victimized by fake news. For instance, if you peruse the internet or read books by certain skeptics, you're bound to see the charge that Christmas, with its virgin birth of Jesus, is actually based on similar legends and mystery religions that came before Christ. In other words, Christianity is merely a copycat religion that plagiarized this idea of the incarnation from earlier mythology. And therefore, it's only really as valid as the fanciful tales about Zeus or Perseus. Thomas Jefferson said in 1823, "The day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus by the Supreme Being as his Father in the womb of a virgin will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter." A contemporary skeptic put it this way: "The notion that Jesus had no human father because he was the Son of God was originally a pagan notion. Gentiles in pagan culture expect a man whose life embodied divinity to have a divine father and a human mother. The virgin birth thus corresponds to what Gentile Christians expected in a biography of Jesus." But is all of that true? Is Christmas really built on mythology? Was the idea of a virgin birth merely appropriated from earlier legends or tall tales? Or does it stand on a solid foundation of historical truth? Let's take a deeper look at all of this. In this session, we're going to dig beneath the fake news and get to the real story about the birth of Jesus. This is going to be fun. This is going to be like my old newspaper days. Several years ago, the novel The Da Vinci Code popularized this mantra: "Nothing in Christianity is original." Now, even though it was a work of fiction, the book claimed that its underlying religious assertions were true. And the novel reported that Christianity is a copycat religion that stole its essential beliefs, including the virgin birth of Jesus, from earlier mythology, legends, and so-called mystery religions. Like a lot of fake news, the case sounded convincing at first. For example, critics say there were stories of an earlier mythological god named Mithras, long before Jesus was born. Did you know that Mithras was born of a virgin in a cave on December the 25th and had 12 disciples? He sacrificed himself for world peace. He was buried in a tomb, and he rose again 3 days later. Now, does that sound familiar? I mean, could this mystery religion called Mithraism be the real source for Christian beliefs about Christmas and Easter? What about legends that the god Zeus actually fathered Alexander the Great? Or that Buddha was born of a virgin? Oh, and Krishna too. It seems there was a proliferation of virgin births well before the story of Jesus' virginal conception. All of this can be very troubling when you first hear it, except that it's fake news. It reminds me of what Proverbs 18:17 says. "The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him." Now, in the same way, fake news often comes across as convincing until we go to a reliable fact-checking website where the initial claim is subjected to rigorous investigation and cross-examination. And often, that's when we recognize that the original news was Well, it was exaggerated or even outright fabricated. So let's do our own fact checking. Let's look into the claims about this mythological Mithras. What do we find when we examine the record more thoroughly? Well, we discover that he wasn't born of a virgin. Such a claim was never made. Instead, the myth says that Mithras emerged fully grown out of a rock, and he was wearing a hat. No virgins and no caves. Besides, as we said in the last session, the idea that Jesus was born in a cave is nowhere in the New Testament anyway. Was there a claim that Mithras was born on December the 25th? Sure, but so what? The Gospels don't tell us when Jesus was born. Spring was the most likely time because shepherds were watching their flocks at night, and this is when ewes bore their young. Around AD 200, theologians got together and they concluded that Jesus was born on May 20th. Others believe that the date may have been in April or in March. It wasn't until the 4th century that December the 25th was chosen as the date to celebrate Jesus' birth, in part to bring a Christian influence to the pagan celebrations of the winter solstice. So right down the line, the supposed parallels disappear. Mithras didn't have 12 disciples. In the Iranian version, he had one follower. In the Roman version, he had two. Mithras didn't sacrifice himself for world peace. He was known for killing a bull. And there are no records of any beliefs about the death of Mithras, and therefore no beliefs at all about a supposed resurrection. So this is what we find whenever we investigate claims of cases involving virgin births. For example, the mother of Alexander the Great, Olympias, rejected the story that he was conceived through Zeus. The Hindu god Krishna wasn't born of a virgin. His mother already had 7 previous sons, as his followers readily concede. As for Buddha, his early years are shrouded in mystery, but according to legends, it developed 500 years later. Buddha's mother dreamed that he entered her in the form of a white elephant, fully formed. And get this, she had been married for many years prior to this, so she certainly wasn't a virgin. One of the most frequently cited parallels to the Jesus account is the story of Dionysus, who's a god of wine and fertility, who's also known as Bacchus. I asked the historian Edward Yamauchi for his analysis of that mythological story, and he told me this, quote, "No," he said, "there's no evidence of a virgin birth for Dionysus. As the story goes, Zeus, disguised as a human, fell in love with the princess Semele, the daughter of Cadmus, and she became pregnant. Hera, who was Zeus's queen, arranged to have her burned to a crisp, but Zeus rescued the fetus and sewed him into his own thigh until Dionysus was born. So, this is not a virgin birth in any sense." I asked Yamauchi about the story of Zeus impregnating Gania through a shower of gold and her giving birth to Perseus. Yamauchi told me there are many stories about Zeus and his liaisons with human women. Here's the big difference. The Jewish God, Yahweh, could be anthropomorphic, but these were metaphors not to be taken literally. Whereas in Greek mythology, the anthropomorphism was taken quite literally. The gods were very human. They lusted after mortal women. That's the focus of these myths. Although Yahweh is sometimes expressed in human imagery, he is utterly unlike human beings. So these parallels break down on a very fundamental level. You're talking about two very different concepts of God. The prominent scholar J. Gresham Machen of Princeton Theological Seminary makes a similar point in his magnum opus called The Virgin Birth of Christ. He says, quote, "Zeus may have had union with Dania, not in human form, but in a shower of gold. But all the same, the union is a satisfaction of his lust for the human maid. Everywhere it is a love of the God for the mortal woman, and not merely the exclusion of a human father of the child, which stands in the forefront of interest. And then he asks this question, which has an obvious answer. Could anything be more utterly remote from the representation in Matthew and Luke than these stories of the amours of Zeus? He later provides his own answer when he reaches his final conclusion on the topic. He says, quote, there seems to be no clear evidence that pagan sources use the word virgin as referring to the mothers of heroes, mythical or historical, who were represented as being begotten by the gods. I'll mention one other major difference between the account of Jesus' birth and these other mythological or historical stories that are claimed to be parallels. Those other births always represent the beginning of that person's life. But that wasn't true of Jesus. He has existed from eternity past, and his birth merely represents his incarnation into flesh and blood. In other words, he didn't begin to exist at Christmas. He has always existed. And there's no other story that comes close to matching this important distinction. Now, some of the promoters of the mythology theory like to point out that the Christian apologist Justin Martyr in the middle of the 2nd century seemed to suggest that Jesus and the mythological Perseus share a virgin birth in common. See, the critics say, even early Christians saw the link. However, when you read what Justin Martyr actually wrote, you can see this is just a misunderstanding of what he was saying. You see, Justin Martyr was trying to diffuse Roman attacks on the church because at the time, the Romans were severely persecuting Christians. So Justin was telling the emperor, look, you don't persecute people who worship other gods who are similar, so why persecute Christians? He was actually saying to his pagan opponents, you hold that the virgin birth of Christ is unbelievable. Well, is it any more unbelievable than the stories that you believe yourselves? He wasn't actually equating the virgin birth of Jesus with the birth of Perseus. He was merely using a rhetorical flourish to undermine the arguments of his opponents. What's more, many of these supposed virgin births don't occur until after Christianity. So if there was any borrowing, it would have been in the other direction. For instance, Zoroaster lived hundreds of years before Christ, but the idea that his mother conceived him by consuming a sacred drink doesn't appear until 900 years after Jesus. And even if some stories did come before Jesus, that doesn't mean they influence Christianity. After all, Christianity is rooted in Judaism, which is a religion that strongly resisted the incorporation of pagan beliefs. It's a logical fallacy to say that just because something occurred earlier, it necessarily influenced something later. For example, Plato wrote about the existence of God a long time before the Apostle Paul. But the Apostle Paul never depended on the Greek philosopher in writing his epistles. What I discovered in my investigation is that these legends bear no resemblance to the incarnation of Jesus. They are generally mythological tales about gods desiring mortal women who give birth to half-human, half-divine heroes who have the same weaknesses and the same sins as we do. That's in stark contrast to the accounts about Jesus. The truth is that proponents of these myth theories often mistranslate texts, they lift quotations out of context, and they use Christian terminology and imagery to try to force parallels where none exist. And that's not just a conclusion of conservative Christian scholars. Thomas Boslooper, who was a liberal professor who wrote a book on the virgin birth, even though he personally doubted whether it was historical, he nevertheless scoffed at the suggestion that the virgin birth was derived from pagan myths. His conclusion was really scathing. Let me quote it to you. Contemporary writers invariably use only secondary sources to verify such claims. The scholars whose judgments they accept rarely produced or quoted the primary sources. The literature of the old German school of religion, which has become the authority for contemporary scholars who wish to perpetuate the notion that the virgin birth in the New Testament has a non-Christian source, is characterized by brief word, phrase, and sentence quotations that have been lifted out of context or incorrectly translated and used to support preconceived theories. Sweeping generalizations based on questionable evidence have become dogmatic conclusions that cannot be substantiated on the basis of careful investigation. Another leading scholar told me this, quote, "I don't think anyone can make a convincing case that the virgin birth of Jesus, which is reported quite soon after the fact and in documents that are sober in their reporting, was derived from any pagan or other sources." And one of America's premier New Testament scholars, Raymond E. Brown, who taught at Union Theological Seminary in New York for 23 years, came to this conclusion, quote, "No search for parallels has given us a truly satisfactory explanation of how early Christians happened upon the idea of a virginal conception. Unless, of course, that is what really took place." I love the way he put that. We can't identify any way that this idea of a virgin birth could have been imported into Christianity. So where would it have come from? Unless that's what actually occurred. Friends, the bottom line is this. The reports of Jesus' birth, his teachings, his death, and his resurrection appear in a historical context. They're based on eyewitness accounts and are recorded virtually immediately after his life. They bear the earmarks of authenticity. They aren't the kind of flights of fancy that are found in mythological tales. So when we celebrate Christmas, we can be confident we're commemorating the birth of the unique Son of God, who came on a mission to seek and save those who are spiritually lost. I remember when I was a kid, I came running down the stairs on Christmas morning to see what Santa Claus had left me under the tree, and I tripped. And as I fell forward, my arms flailed as I desperately tried to grab the air as if the air was somehow going to break my fall, which of course it couldn't. I was lucky I wasn't badly hurt, but you know what I was thinking? That's a bit what it's like when we try to grab a hold of legends and make-believe and wishful thinking and even fake news. They can't save us and they can't support us. Instead, we need to anchor our lives in something solid. And that's what the Word of God is. It isn't mythology, it's reality. It's based on truth. So this Christmas season, it's a good time to ground ourselves once more in the Scriptures. You know, mythologies begin with phrases like, once upon a time. They're not rooted in history. They don't claim to be based on eyewitness testimony. They're like bedtime stories meant to entertain or teach a lesson. But that's not what the New Testament is like. On the contrary, the Apostle Peter writes in 2 Peter 1:16, "For we did not follow cleverly devised tales." In other words, we didn't follow fairy tales or mythology when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. And the Apostle John declares this in 1 John 1:1. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. Now, that's the kind of truth that we can confidently anchor our lives in.
Okay, let's get back to the slideshow. Excuse me. Let me try. There we go. Okay, slideshow from Kurt Slot. Okay, yeah, so that's Lee Strobel. If you don't know who he is, I would highly recommend looking him up. He is a former atheist. He was a journalist in Chicago, and he tries to disprove Christianity. So now, and as you can tell, came to become a Christian, a well-known Christian of our day now. Okay, what stood out in this video? There's a lot of information. I know it's kind of tough to get all that information all at once, but something must have stood out, if anything. So comment what stood out to you. Could it have been the different myths people associate Jesus with, like Perseus or Matthias or Buddha or all these other people? Or could it be different views of the thing, of the story? So, took a little picture. This is Mithridates. I said Matthias by accident. So they talked about him. Critics say there is a story of an early mythological god named Mithridates long before Jesus was born, who was born of a virgin in a cave on December 25th. He had 12 disciples, sacrificed himself for world peace, was buried in a tomb, and rose again 3 days later. Does that sound familiar? It should. It pretty much sounds a lot like Jesus. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the notes from the video. So, okay, Mithridates actually wasn't born of a virgin. He came out of a rock, fully grown, and he was also wearing a hat. Don't know why that was important, but that's part of the thing. It is true, though, that Mithridates might have been born on December 25th. Now, again, we don't believe that he was real, but if you go by his story, then the evidence would say, yes, in the story, he was born around December 25th. But again, so what? We do not know when Jesus was born. I agree it was probably in the springtime. There's certain evidence to prove that. Now, some people say, Well, then why do we celebrate December 25th? There is a few reasons why we celebrate December 25th. One reason is a pope was looking to do a celebration for Jesus and his birth, and not all, but some of it came around the time of, well, there's this major pagan holiday, and he kind of wants to get rid of it. So he kind of picks this time. Another theory, now again, that theory, there is some truth to it, very slim some truth to it. But another theory is in ancient times, when you died, they believed your birthday was 9 months forward. So Jesus dies around April, May. They put in 9 months, and bam, December. That is another theory, and there is some evidence to that. Not the fact that his birthday, but the reason of how they came to that decision. And another one, and if you're in the Dexter area this Saturday, we'd love to have you at noon. We're going to be playing the Star of Bethlehem. There is a video on theories of the Star of Bethlehem. And when he does this, he goes and he looks at the stars around the time of Jesus' birth, and they actually believe December 25th is when the wise men finally came and worshiped Jesus in Bethlehem. Now, again, we don't fully know. Astronomy has its ways of proving these things. Now, again, remember, the wise men, even though we say in the nativity scene, were not there when Jesus first was born. They came in around 1.5 to 2 years after Jesus' birth. So we don't know when they came, but there are some star evidence to prove that they possibly could have came the 25th of December. Okay, there is no clear evidence that pagan sources uses the word virgin as reference to the mothers of heroes, mythical or historical, who were representative as being begotten by the gods. So Alexander the Great, Buddha, all these people were supposedly, their parents were either virgins or their fathers were gods, in the case of Alexander the Great. But if you study the history, a lot of these women were married previously, had kids. Alexander the Great's mom was married to the king of Macedon, Philip II, I believe he was. I know it's Philip. I don't know if he was the second or whatnot. So there's no way that she would have been a virgin, and the same goes for the others. Okay, many of the supposed virgin birth stories don't occur until after Christianity. So if there was any borrowing, it would be in the other direction. Even if some stories did come before Jesus, it doesn't mean they influenced Christianity. I've noticed this kind of stereotype a lot recently, where if I post stuff on Christmas, they're like, you shouldn't be celebrating Christmas. They stole this, they stole that, and all of that. But as you can see, a lot of the things that they bring up was brought after Christianity. The virgin births of some of these heroes and gods. But yet, before Christianity became popular, there was no mention of virgin births or any of that. It was just mention of this person, had a kid with this person. So, the myths and legends bear no resemblance to the incarnation of Jesus. They are generally mythical, tales about gods desiring mortal women who give birth to half human, half divine heroes who have the same weakness and sins as we do. We see that in Hercules. Hercules is half man, half god. Zeus is his father, and a mortal woman is his mother, I believe. Now, if you watch the Disney version, both his parents are gods. He has Zeus and Hera. They're kind of making it a little more family friendly than the real story would be. But yeah, no, if you I've studied mythology a lot to know that, these gods come down in quote unquote human form and have relations with these women and then they have kids from these and then become half man, half god people. Okay, last bit of notes before we kind of wrap it up. Like I said, I don't have the books. We have some questions. But again, I'm going to go later on tonight, probably 10 or 11, just because I got some stuff planned. I will come back on and redo the video a little bit, add some more to the thing. But some last bit of notes. No search for parallels has given a true satisfactory explanation of how early Christians happened upon the idea of virgin conception, unless, of course, it really took place. So again, we don't have any explanations of parallel. So, like again, the stories of other religions having virgin conceptions and births. So no one has really found any satisfactory explanation for these things. The reports of Jesus' birth, teachings, death, and resurrection appear in a historical context, are based on eyewitness accounts, and are recorded virtually immediately after his death. We've talked about this before in previous lessons about how the Gospels, so that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written roughly 30 years after Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection. So, and they even say, go and talk to these people because they actually saw this stuff happen to make sure it's real. So we have, it's all in historical context, and that's how we kind of know it's real. The Gospels is because of when they are written, who are they written to, where do they get their information from, and stuff like that. So we're going to have some group discussions. Now, again, bear with me. Again, I forgot the book. But the first question, how much did you know about Mithridates or the other legends mentioned prior to the teachings you just saw? So I didn't know anything about this guy, Mithridates, but I did know a lot about Perseus, about Hercules. I knew some stuff about Buddha and others like that. Okay, question to go with that one. What do you think about the similarities between the virgin birth of Jesus and some of the mythical concepts that seem similar? So the Mithridates story, what do you think of the similarities of Jesus and him? Does it bring some caution, some doubts? Again, normal to have these responses, these feelings. Comment. We love to interact with you more on these stuff. Okay, next question. I'm going to read Hebrews 4:15. I'm going to read in the NLT. So, chapter 4, verses 15 says, remember what it says. Today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts, as Israel did when they rebelled. So remember that verse. Again, read it, look it up yourself. Always look up Scripture yourself. Look at verses previous, look at verses after, and see if what I'm saying with this lesson, what they're saying, goes with Scripture. But so most of the mythical tales on which critics say Jesus' birth story is based involve a hero who is half God, half man. But that same hero struggled with sin and weakness. Again, Hercules. The guy gets hurt all the time. He fights all these things, and he has to try to think of how to fix these problems he has. Perseus almost gets killed a couple times by stuff, and they all die at some point too. And they all deal with their own, for women, etc. But how does this differ from what the Bible teaches about Jesus? So, see, what is the difference? What is the difference between these mythical stories? Now, my thing is half God, half man. Jesus is 100% God and 100% man, all at the same time. He's not half God, half man. He does not struggle with sin or weakness. Does he have moments where he has to fight certain things, like hunger, like temptation, like pain? Yes. We see that when he gets tempted by the devil, that he fights it, but he's hungry. And then even saying, he's hungry. We also see that in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he's praying to God, please don't make me go through this. Please don't make me go through all this pain. Okay, group discussion. Why is it adventurous to know that the reports of the virgin birth were recorded virtually immediately after Jesus' resurrection and ascension? So what's the advantages of knowing this? Well, I'm going to go back to Alexander the Great. Remember, they said Alexander the Great, his mom said, his father's Zeus, he's half God, half man. That's how he got all of his stuff done. And if you look at it, his writings about him happened hundreds of years after his death. Nobody would have been around to have said, no, that's not true. He never said that. He never did that. Now, do I believe a good amount of what the stories say about him? Yes. And that's because you have stuff talking about from other people too. But again, there's some stuff that's questionable. But again, that's another thing about mythology. Same probably goes for Hercules and other people. They probably might have been real people. I always think that Samson kind of reflects what Hercules is like. A very strong man that does a lot of stuff. I'm not saying that I'm right and that's true, that Hercules' story was stolen from Samson, but there are, some similarities about this story. But again, written probably hundreds of years of whoever the real Hercules was or whatnot. So we don't know truth from fiction. Okay, how does that lend credibility to the claim that Jesus was born of a virgin? I think it has quite a bit of credibility. Because, again, people can question it and say, I was there, this doesn't make any sense. Or people could be like, I know Mary, this is not true. So people can question it and be like, and no one throughout these years, or at least the people that were there, never really questioned the story. What questions have you had in the past about the truth of the virgin birth? I have a long list. I'm not even going to get on talking about them really, but it's normal to have questions. Like, there are some Christians out there, some very well-known Christians that say, I believe in the Bible. There's too much evidence for the Bible to be true than not true. But there are certain things in the Bible that I just can't fathom or answer or come up with an answer of how is it true. And the number one thing that they say is the virgin birth. They're like, I'm not saying it's never happened. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm just saying I can't prove this this event happened. They don't throw it out. They don't think it's not real. They believe it's real because of their belief in the Bible and other stuff. But if they get questioned, be like, hey, prove that this is possible. They're like, we can't. How does this week's teaching help to illuminate these questions? Not really that much. Like, for me, not really much. Because again, it doesn't really prove, but it does give us the recommendation that the story happened and was told and then written down years after Jesus' death and resurrection. So there's a lot more chance of being credible than anything else. Okay. What other questions do you still have at this point that you want to discuss with the group? We're not in a group. Sad, but we're not. So comment other questions you might have. And I would love to interact with you in any platform we're on. We're on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, Instagram. So comment, message us. We'd love to interact with you on questions you might have about the Bible. Okay, so session 2, take home in your binder. We went through in the beginning. Go over it, answer some questions if you have it, if you're in our youth group and we got it. Try to read chapter 3 of The Case for Christmas. It's a great book. Again, I have to read it. This week is like finals weeks for me, so I have stuff I have to get done. But my plan is to catch up and to get done and all that. If you like, please like these videos. Go and watch the other videos. Follow us, subscribe, all that. Let us interact with you. If you go on our social, connect with us on our Facebook. Again, New Hope. I think we're like NHBC everywhere as we go. If you see the logo on our YouTube page, that's probably us. So we love to hear from you. And we love that you are joining us. And if you're in our youth group, I hope we get to see each other. Like I said, this Saturday we are doing a movie night, movie day, around noon. Sunday we are going to be having a youth group, weather permits, of course. We live in Maine, and we would love to see you guys in person. If you're watching this and you're in the Dexter area, we would love to have you come and visit us in person. If you're an adult, we would love for you to come for church service. Church services, we have 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings. The adults meet for Sunday school. 10 o'clock, we have church service. We usually end around 11:30 church service. So it's like an hour and a half church service usually. And then, of course, youth group, we meet right after. And we go around from like 12 to 2. And then Wednesday nights, we meet for youth group 5 to 7 p.m. So we'd love to interact with you guys more. Comment. Let us know where you're from. We love that too. And God bless. We hope you're having a great Christmas season. And remember, Jesus is the reason for the season. And we're trying to learn the truth behind the Christmas story and what are some stuff that are questionable. We're glad that you joined us, either live or later on. and we hope you interact with us more often. Have a great rest of your day and be safe.